Good evening and welcome aboard. If you are joining us on the live stream, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us. So happy to have you here with us tonight. And if you are joining us later on the YouTube channel, thanks for finding us. While you're at it, please go ahead and like and subscribe if you like our content. Train Tuesday comes to you every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. And let's start off with some shout outs. Let's see who's joining us tonight. We have Donnie, Bradley, Eugene, Harold, DG Model Works is in the house, Toledo Railfan, Joel, Greg, Donnie, Jeffrey, Anthony, Glenn, Ronald, Ian, Dustin, and Paul, just to name a few. We've got a lot of guys joining us tonight. I'm so glad to have you guys on board. Now, tonight we're going to be talking Genesis again, but we're going to be talking about freight cars. And guys, doesn't matter if you model HO scale or N scale. If you're modeling from the 1960s into the 70s, I have something for you here tonight. This is going to be our Genesis edition of the GATC 2600 covered hoppers. Now, for the N scale guys, this is all new in Genesis. We'll talk about some of the added refinements to bring this model into the Genesis class. And there's a lot of road names here that a lot of you have been anxiously awaiting. So we'll talk about those in a second. Before we get started, let's do one more round of shout outs and see who's joining us. We have John, Terry, Mark, Earl, Robert, Terry, Joseph, Randall, Eugene, and Abel, Maurice, and Owen. Just to name a few, thank you for joining us. Let's go ahead and get settled into another night of Train Tuesday. And like I said, we're going to be talking about Genesis tonight. We're going to be talking about the Genesis GATC covered hoppers. So let's get started on a little bit of history on these guys, and then we will talk about these in depth. Now, starting in 1953, General American Transportation began building the Airslide covered hoppers. One of the two original configurations was the 2,600 cubic foot single bay car with a 70-ton capacity. In addition to railroad-owned cars, there were several Airslide covered hoppers leased by GATC to sugar and bakery companies. Later, larger cars were introduced as the railroad continued to improve their infrastructure. To extend the useful lives of the smaller 2,600 cubic foot cars, some of them were permanently connected in a 2-unit drawbar set. Now, the drawbar set operated as a single car and therefore had a whopping total of 5,200 cubic feet. However, due to their substantial length, that did provide some noticeable drawbacks. Well, what we have here is one of our Athearn HO scale Genesis GATC cars that we announced back in March of 2000. 2020. And these were delivered just last year. Now, what I'll do is I'll zoom in. So if you are not familiar with this freight car, you can see some of the details that are involved here. Now, this particular model is HO scale. But when we zoom in, you can see all the separately applied grab irons, metal etched roof walk, very clear and legible reporting marks. And as I bring this over to here, you can see the different details for the discharge chutes, the nicely done trucks, and of course, and not just HO, but also an N scale, these will have the air hoses that you can see right here, and the cut levers that you can see here. So very nicely detailed model. If you've got a bakery on your layout, you're certainly going to want to bring these in. Again, we're going to be talking about roads as they appeared in the 60s and 70s into the 80s. So you've got a pretty wide range of cars that can be used on your layout. So let's get started with the cars that we're offering in this run. And everything I'm about to show you, you have until next Friday, the 25th, to place your pre-orders in order to get these cars next year at this time. So you remember me talking about the drawbar set. This one here, this is Missouri Pacific, car number 720986. This is as it appeared in 1984. It was built in 1955, originally as two separate cars. These cars were permanently connected with a drawbar into a two-piece car configuration for a total of 5,200 cubic feet. These cars began to appear in this configuration in 1984 and continued service well out throughout the 1980s. Again, if you're modeling the 1980s and you've got a big bakery, sugar refinery, any of those types of industries on your layout, you can certainly spot these. And if you're using for your layout a little bit more modern covered hoppers, this will definitely make your crew work a little bit harder, maybe think a little bit harder on spotting these cars, because again, while they did solve the problem with cubic footage as far as material, they tended to be a little bit of a pain in the switching department because of their length. Coming up next is the Northern Pacific car. Northern Pacific uh, had this car appear like this in 1965, and these lasted into the 1970s, well into early 1980s, in fact. And if you wanted to, you could run these cars as is, as a 1965 to 1970 era freight car, but with some aftermarket decals that would include ACI labels, wheel inspection, and the updated consolated stencils decals. You could definitely bring this into the 1970s and into the early 80s. Do a search real quick, and you'll find a lot of these cars lasted in pretty much this same paint scheme right up until about 1980 or so. We're bringing you the Santa Fe. The last time that we had the Santa Fe, it was in a different paint scheme. It was in the gray paint scheme. These are based on 1973 on up 70-ton Airslide hopper cars that were built by GATC um, in October through November of 1961. Now, again, this is slightly different from the last ones that we offered. This is a 1973 era paint scheme, so could be continue to be used well out through into the 70s. Now, this next car, I am going to preface by saying we are not finished on the artwork. Now, many years ago, we offered this car, and the artwork was not 100% based on the DNH. We have updated that. However, we still have some more updates to do on this freight car. We wanted to show it to you tonight, though, so you had an idea of where we're going. Now, this is Delaware and Hudson car number 12802, and these are based on cars from 1977 on up. These cars were brought in after the formation of Conrail for DNH, and they were basically secondhand cars. Now, they have a build date of 1957, but the paint date is actually 477. Now, depending on the car, those dates can fluctuate somewhat. Now, because these are 70s cars, and this is where the art update is going to come into hand, these are going to have ACI panels, this COTS data, and the U1 yellow dot applied. Some of those markings will be relocated too, but as soon as we get some updated art, we'll go ahead and throw that up on our social media so you guys have an idea of what these will actually look like. Now, again, these are both HO and N scale. So we're going to talk about the roads first, and then we're going to go into the details of both the HO and then the N scale. So here's an earlier car. This car here is Pennsylvania Railroad 44132. This is based on a build date of 1959, and they can be used throughout the 60s. Now, the Pennsylvania Railroad leased and owned an assortment of General American 2600 Airslide covered hoppers. The Pennsylvania Railroad leased this group starting in 1959. Again, careful research and some additional decals, you can stretch these into the 70s, all the way up into the Conrail era with a lot of weathering and, again, addition of those decals. Here's another one that's created quite a buzz on the internet and on the forums, and even at the show that we attended this past weekend. This is the Revere Sugar Refinery cars. Now, we've offered these in HO and N in the past. However, on the N scale side of things, these were just our standard N scale. These new ones will have Genesis features, including the cut levers and the air hoses. Now, a little bit of history on these and the company in which it represents. First of all, the car represents a car that was painted in 1957. Again, 57 throughout the 1960s, not a lot of change. Established in 1871, the Revere Sugar Refinery specialized in the production of refined sugar. The six-story plant, which had the capacity to produce 1,400 barrels of sugar a day, was originally situated near Miller's River in East Cambridge. By the late 19th century, the company became a subsidiary of United Fruit Company, and production was moved to a modern refinery in Boston. Now, that information came to me from a 1934 article on Massachusetts industry. So a little bit of a background on there. Unfortunately, this company is no longer around. They lasted right around, well, they didn't outlive Domino, unfortunately. But this company is faded into history, but not on your layout. And I know a lot of guys have been looking for this car. So now you have a chance to build up your fleet once again. Now let's talk a little bit about the features, starting with the HO scale. Here's some of the bigger bullet points to remember on these Genesis cars. We're offering these in 3 different body styles based on the prototype. They're going to have detailed underbody, including the outlet piping, rectangular or oval shaker brackets, gravity or gravity pneumatic outlets, see-through metal roof walk, factory installed wire grab irons and brake piping, separately applied round roof hatches and brake wheel, and of course roller bearing or Bettendorf trucks, again based on the prototype. So there's your list. Now you guys in the HO, you've seen these before. We're just offering new roads. And so you probably have expected those details to be in the HO scale version. But N scale guys, you guys are going to get some of those details as well. Now these are just some of the features that we're offering on the newly refined Genesis model. All of these are going to have a detailed underbody, including the outlet piping, rectangular or oval shaker brackets, gravity or gravity pneumatic outlets, newly tooled coupler cut levers, also newly tooled rubber train line hoses. All of them, of course, will have machined metal wheels, and they will work on everything from code 80, code 55, all the way down to code 40 track. Here's the neat detail that a lot of N-scale guys are not used to. Factory installed wire grab irons and brake piping. Separately applied round roof hatches and brake wheel. And like the HO scale cousin, roller bearing or Bettendorf trucks, again based on the prototype. Now another thing is these are all body mount couplers. And they will of course feature the McHenry operating scale knuckle couplers, which are compatible with all N-scale scale-like knuckle couplers. Now, for you guys that want to know the minimum radius on the HO scale cars, you can run these on an 18-inch radius without any issues. N-scale guys, you can run these on 9 3/4. So that means you can run these on everything from T-track, N-track, Fremo N, or your home layout. Now, considering they are extremely detailed and somewhat delicate, most of you guys will probably run these on your home layout. But they're definitely in the realm of the guy that wants to make a industry-based layout that is predominantly operations. This gives them a level of detail only prior seen in HO scale. HO scale individual cars will retail for $59.99, and the Missouri Pacific version, which is the 2-car piece, is $104.99. Now remember, those prices are standard MSRP. Check with your dealer for prices. N-scale guys, your individual cars will be $39.99, and with the Missouri Pacific version going for $69.99. So beautiful cars. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the model while we look at questions. All right, so let's go through some questions here real quick and see what's on your mind. I'm going to go back a little bit because I know you guys may have been asking questions while I was doing the broadcast. Richard, welcome to the show. He's got some suggestions. He says you guys need a modern plastic pellet covered hopper, Trinity 5850, early and late 6421 cars. Also a steel car, a steel coil car no one else is doing. Well, Richard, thank you for those suggestions. I'm going to point you to our website at athearn.com. Go to the Contact Us page. You will see the Athearn product suggestion email. Go ahead and select that and send an email to our developers. I've been talking to a lot of you guys. I got to meet you guys at TrainFest in Milwaukee this past week. Both myself and Mark Williams were there to man the booth. And we were passing those cars out all weekend because you guys had some great ideas. I can't say we're going to get them all done right away until we've figured out how to clone our developers. We are progressing as fast as we can, but do realize that new projects, they do take a little bit. So we are listening to you, and we do appreciate those comments and suggestions. Let's see what other questions we have out here. Donnie's happy about the Mopac. I know a lot of folks were interested in the D&H as well as the Revere cars. And let's see, no questions. A lot of guys happy with the results. Yeah, you know what, Glenn, that's another thing that's neat about those is it's actually not only is it just D&H, but it's a good time frame too. So you can run this in your interchange with Conrail, Boston to Maine. Really cool time. Probably means there's going to be one in my future, at least one. Stephen wants to let us know that the details on these look really great. Thank you. Yes, they are. And again, remember, a lot of those details that I'm showing you on this HO scale car on the screen is also going to be transferred to the N scale car. These are not just warmed over cars. There's been some engineering put into them, and they've been brought up to the Athearn Genesis line. So you N scale guys that have been wanting more detail, there you go. Daylight Dave says, sweet cars. Well, you're welcome. I do my best to get some information to you so that you know where these cars can work on your layout, what error they're at. Keep in mind, too, I have a team of researchers behind me that you can't see. These guys spend a lot of time working on these cars and making sure we get them as accurate as possible. Now, in some cases, like the D&H car, we still have to sharpen our pencils a little bit and get some more details on there. But the good news is we can get those done so that by the time you've pre-ordered them and received them a year from now, they're going to be up to those prototype standards. All right, I'm going to go down a little bit and see if there's any other questions here. Is next week's announcement still scheduled for Friday? Yes. Yes, it is, Said. Always remember, it's the last Friday of the month, every month. Eugene thinks a fleet of 12 of those should be produced. I bet you would purchase them all too, Eugene. Here's a question, a little bit off topic, but I'm going to put it up here anyway. Since we get to see cool niche models like the SD59s and they're mostly tool. Do we get to see some SD60 Max on the horizon sometime soon? Yes, Ian. I don't have any currently, but we will probably be seeing some soon. So keep an eye on our social media feeds. All right. Yes, we are. I wanted to show the model, Terry, because it better represents the actual details. We've already run through the actual road names. If you missed that, just go ahead and at the end of this show, just go back and see it, and we'll talk. You'll see where we talked about them. Winona wants to know what goes into being a developer. Is it CAD or Photoshop based? Things that can be done from any place, or would one need to relocate? No, there's a couple of questions in there, and I'll try to answer them all. First of all, what's it take to be a developer? Well, our developers are well versed in CAD. They're also well versed in reading engineering drawings. Of course, there's some mathematics involved with that. Um, the biggest thing is working from prototype pictures, working from drawings, and then compressing that to 187th or N scale, whatever scale we're working on. And it's a timely process. It may seem simple when you have the finished model in your hand, but making sure in CAD that the cab and the different associated detail parts fit where they're supposed to fit before any molds or cast, it's quite a bit of work. Typically, a developer will build the model in CAD before it's ever finished and put into a mold. Now, as far as relocating, no, that's the beauty of it. The Athearn team is from all over. Primarily, our developers are on the West Coast. Our researchers are on the West Coast. Our base of operations and our category manager is based in the Midwest, and myself, I'm from the Northeast. So we have a well-rounded team, and working remotely allows us to get a lot more done, believe it or not. And that's good because our developers right now are extremely busy. Late Night says, I'm sure the developers also have a love for trains, just a hunch. That's one of the things I said over and over again, not only on this program, but also on this past week being at Train Fest. Myself, I'm an avid model railroader. I can tell you that our developers and most of our artists and researchers are hardcore model railroaders. Some, like Janik, who you've seen in the past, is an avid Fremo modeler. John, who's our lead developer, has been in the hobby for pretty much from the time that he could walk on 2 feet, with a lot of retail experience. And of course, even our category manager is well versed in both HO and N scale. So for the most part, I'd say 90% of the team is a model railroader, and that does help. All right. Let's see. I've got time for one more question. Kyle says he's waiting patiently for Chessie Cabise. I have not talked about the SD59M-2, but let's talk a little bit about what happened this past weekend. So this past weekend, myself and Mark Williams, we went to Milwaukee, one of the great places in this country, and we went to Train Fest. Now, Train Fest has been down for the last few years, mainly due to the pandemic. But this year it was back, and it was back in full force, and that was great. It was great to be back on the show circuit, and we were busy. In fact, I just got my voice back. Saturday was extremely busy. I got to meet a lot of you out there. So for all the fans of Train Tuesdays that came by and stopped by and talked to me, thanks for coming out and introducing me to you. It's always good to put a face to a screen name, and really was encouraging to see all the great modeling and great talent. I don't know how many people were at the show. I haven't heard a tally yet, but it seemed extremely busy on Saturday, and even Sunday was a pretty steady flow of people. Lots of great stuff to see. I didn't go home empty-handed. I even got to see some folks with their own podcasts. I got to see Sean's Trains rather. He stopped by the booth and talked to me for quite a bit. And if you're a fan of Second Section podcast, Second Section podcast, I apologize. Our friends Mike and Andy were there. They were happy enough to stop by and talk to me, and that was great. So great time. A lot of people out there, a lot of modelers, a lot of great stuff to see. If you get the chance to come to Train Fest in the future, by all means, please do. It is a show that you will definitely enjoy. One last thing, and then I'm going to let you guys go. I've got a special bulletin for you. This is by request from the service team at Athearn. Now, we get a lot of questions on the show. We get a lot of questions at the at shows about Athearn service. And here's a few things. There's 5 things I want to share with you quickly tonight that will make your interaction with our service crew that much quicker and make things a lot easier for everybody involved. First of all, point number 1, for the service center to be able to really help you and others faster, when emailing in for parts, please give the service crew the info on the part number for the loco or the rolling stock, the scale, if it's a ready to roll or a Genesis. If you don't know the item number, then please put some pictures of the loco or the rolling stock in the email and pics of the broken or missing pieces. That way they've got a frame of reference and they can better help you quicker. Point number 2, if the loco or rolling stock is beyond 10 years old, in most cases, we will not have the parts available. That's just a fact. Our warehouse is only so big, and typically most parts supply, most parts sources only go back from a manufacturer about 10 years. So if your model is 10 years or older, the chances of our service department having those parts, unfortunately, is rather slim. Now, there are other venues out there. Of course, there's many online auctions and other websites that maybe have helped you. But unfortunately, once again, if that locomotive or that rolling stock is over 10 years old, we simply just don't have the part. Point number 3, please ask for everything you need in the first email. Believe it or not, guys, too often they get an email asking for one part. And that means our service people have to go through a rather large area, through a large amount of parts, look for that part. And then by the time they get that part, they let you know the price of the part and the shipping. And then that same email turns into 6 or 8 additional emails. So make it easier for yourself, make it easier for the service center person. Put down in one email all of the parts you're looking at. That way, when they go out to bird dog those parts, they're looking for them all. They can get back to you. They can give you an estimate on shipping and all of that. So just kind of keep that in mind. Point number 4, and hot topic at Train Fest, hot topic on social media this past week. We do not support blue box kits at all. Why? Well, refer to number 2. We don't have parts for locomotives or rolling stock that are beyond 10 years old. And if you have been doing the math, Blue Box has been away for at least 15 years. Point number 5, let us know up front if you're an international customer. Reason being, shipping will be based on a freight quote, and shipping is very expensive internationally. Also, payment is with wire transfer for international unless you have a U.S. credit card with a U.S. address. So again, if you're an international customer, you're outside the continental United States, shipping is going to be based on a freight quote. And keep in mind that shipping is very expensive if you didn't know that already. And if you're going to make a payment, it's going to have to be done with a wire transfer. So just a few things to help you guys out, help our service guys out. And with everybody on the same page, it just makes things a lot easier. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this evening. I hope there was some great information here for you. I've got time for one more question, and then I'm going to let you guys get back to your layouts, back to your workshop. And Joel, no, I didn't, which is kind of unusual. I didn't have a chance to. I was too busy. Let's see. I just saw a question. Somebody wanted to know what our schedule for next week is. Well, next week, we're still going to have Train Tuesday. Now, for you folks like myself that are in the United States, we're celebrating Thanksgiving next week. You Canadians up there, you already had yours in October. So you don't get out of that Thursday. But we will be here next Tuesday at the same time, 7 o'clock p.m. And the day after Thanksgiving, we will have the new December announcements, and that will be at 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. All right. I think that does it for tonight. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Have a great night. Be happy, be healthy, do some modeling, and above all, high greens. I'll see you next time. Take care.